The table went quiet. 30 people, 30 forks frozen mid-air, and sweet potato pie cooling on the counter. My grandmother's old chandelier throwing orange light across everyone's face. My father was still holding his glass up, still smiling. "We raised a failure," he had just said. About me. To the whole room. I didn't move. I didn't cry. I just looked across the table at the man in the navy suit sitting directly opposite me and watched his face go very, very still. His name was Marcus Thibodeau, CEO of Meridian Development Group, my father's boss, also the man who had personally signed a $3,800,000 contract with my urban planning firm 8 months earlier. My father had no idea. My name is Deja Whitfield. I'm 31 years old. And what happened next, starting with what Big Mama Odessa did at the end of that meal, is something this family will never forget. Before I tell you what happened next, please take a moment to like and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy this story. I'd also love to know where you're watching from and what time it is there. Drop a comment below. Now let me take you back to where it all started. My family looked good on paper. Curtis and Yvonne Whitfield, 3rd Ward, Houston, Texas, brick house on Tierwester Street, 2 cars in the driveway front porch with a swing that nobody ever sat on. My father wore pressed slacks to church every Sunday. My mother made her sweet potato pie from scratch, real butter, fresh nutmeg, the recipe passed down from Big Mama Odessa. From the outside, we were a solid Black family doing everything right. From the inside, it was a different story. There were 4 of us children. Deshaun was the oldest, my brother, my father's mirror image, the one Curtis talked about at every family reunion. Like he was already famous. Then came Brianna, then me, then my younger brother Jerome, who mostly stayed quiet and watched everything from the corner. Deshaun and Brianna were my parents' pride. Jerome and I were just there. But between Brianna and me, the difference wasn't just about personality. It was about skin. Brianna had my mother's complexion. Light brown smooth, what the older women at our church called a pretty color. People stopped Yvonne in the grocery store to compliment Brianna's skin when she was barely old enough to walk. My mother would smile and say thank you, like she had made something fine. I had my father's complexion, deep brown dark, the kind of dark that certain people in certain rooms treated like a problem to be managed. I didn't understand it when I was small. I just knew that when the family photographer came to the reunion, my mother always positioned Brianna in the center of the frame. I was on the edge. Every single year. In the photos from when I was 6 years old all the way through high school graduation, I am always on the edge. Once I was maybe 9 years old, I asked my mother why. She looked at me with an expression I didn't have a name for yet. Then she said, "You're cute in your own way, baby. Brianna just photographs better." I didn't say anything. I went to my room and sat on my bed and looked at my hands for a long time. That was my first lesson about what my family thought of me. It would not be the last. My father, Curtis Whitfield, worked at Meridian Development Group, a mid-sized construction and property development firm, headquartered in Houston's Galleria district. He had been there for 19 years, assistant operations manager. A solid position, respectable, the kind of job that came with a company polo shirt and a parking space with his name on a little sign. Curtis was proud of that parking space. He mentioned it often. He was a man who measured worth in titles and appearances. A man who believed that how you looked in front of other people was the most important thing in the world. Which is why I think having a dark-skinned daughter who asked too many questions and refused to smile on command made him deeply uncomfortable. My mother, Yvonne, was more complicated. She wasn't cold. She could be warm, generous, funny even. But she had a way of loving her children unevenly that she genuinely did not seem to notice. Or maybe she noticed and told herself it was natural. Either way, the math was always the same. Brianna got the new Easter dress. I got the altered hand-me-down. Brianna got her hair done at the salon on Alameda Road every 2 weeks, $35 a visit. My mother pressed my hair at the kitchen table with a comb she heated on the stove. I still have a small scar behind my left ear from where she slipped one Sunday morning when she was rushing to get ready for church. She never apologized for it. I don't think she noticed. The first time I understood clearly, not just felt, but understood that I was being treated differently was the summer I turned 11 years old. Our church, Greater Zion Missionary Baptist on Holman Street, held its annual family and community celebration every July. It was the biggest event of the summer. The parking lot filled up. The pastor wore his best suit. The children's choir performed. The women's auxiliary set up tables of food that stretched the length of the fellowship hall. My mother spent 2 weeks preparing. She bought Brianna a new yellow dress from Macy's, $48 I know, because I saw the receipt on the kitchen counter. White sandals, a yellow ribbon for her hair. Brianna looked like something out of a catalog. I wore a dress that had been Brianna's the summer before. It was pale blue, slightly faded at the hem, with a small stain near the pocket that my mother had tried to bleach out but hadn't quite managed. She ironed it and told me I looked fine. At the celebration, the church ladies circled around Brianna immediately. "Look at this beautiful child. Yvonne, she is just stunning. Lord have mercy, this girl is going to break some hearts." One of the older women, Miss Claudette, who had known my grandmother for 40 years, reached past Brianna and touched my shoulder. "And this one?" she said. "This one has her grandmother's eyes, smart eyes." My mother smiled thinly. "That's Deja," she said, like she was identifying an item on a list. Not long after, a woman I didn't recognize leaned toward my mother and asked, nodding in my direction, "Is that Raymond's girl? She favors his side." My mother's smile didn't move. "No, that's mine too." The way she said it, "mine too," landed somewhere in my chest and stayed there for years. I found Big Mama Odessa in the corner of the fellowship hall near the end of the evening. She was 70 years old that summer, sitting in a folding chair with a paper fan in her hand, watching everything the way she always did, quietly, completely missing nothing. She saw me coming. She opened her arm and I sat down beside her without a word. We didn't talk for a few minutes. We just watched the room together. Then she said low and even, "You know what I see when I look at you." I shook my head. "I see your great-grandmother Odessa the First." She tapped her fan against her knee. "The one this land in Brenham belonged to before it belonged to any of us. Dark as good soil, strong as anything that grows from it." She paused. "Don't let nobody make you small baby. Not in this room, not anywhere." I didn't fully understand what she meant about the land in Brenham. I was 11. But I held on to her words the way you hold on to something you know you'll need later. Because even then, standing at the edge of every photograph wearing my sister's faded dress, hearing my mother say mine too, I knew that what was happening in my family was not something I had imagined. And I knew, without being able to say why, that Big Mama Odessa was the only person in that building who saw me completely. I didn't know then that she had been watching not just that day, but for years, watching and making plans that none of us knew anything about. I was a good student, not good the way people say it to be polite, good the way that required something early mornings, library, afternoons, notebooks filled front to back, while Brianna watched reality television in the next room. I graduated from Worthing High School with a 4.0 GPA, ranked second in my class, won the District Mathematics Award 2 years in a row. My AP History teacher, Mr. Caldwell, told me I had one of the sharpest analytical minds he had taught in 20 years. I did not tell my parents what Mr. Caldwell said. I had learned by then that sharing good news in the Whitfield house was a complicated business. There was always a redirect, always a pivot back to Brianna or Deshawn, always something that made the good news feel smaller by the time the conversation ended. So I kept it to myself. I got used to celebrating quietly. Senior year, I applied to Prairie View A&M University, a historically Black university 45 miles northwest of Houston. I had done my research. Prairie View had a strong civil engineering and urban planning program. It had produced graduates who went on to reshape cities. It felt like the right place for what I wanted to build. I was accepted, with a partial scholarship, $14,000 per year toward tuition. I still needed $20,000 to cover the gap, room board remaining fees. I sat my parents down at the kitchen table on a Tuesday evening in March. I had printed out the acceptance letter, the scholarship award, the cost breakdown. I had organized everything into a folder. I was 17 years old, and I had prepared for this conversation like it was a job interview. My father looked at the folder. He did not open it. "Prairie View," he said. The way he said it told me everything. "It's a good school," I said. "It's an HBCU. The urban planning program is. That school is not worth the investment." He pushed the folder back across the table. Get a trade, something practical. My mother was quiet for a moment. Then she said, Deja, your father knows what he's talking about. There are good programs at the community college. I looked at her. I have a 4.0. I have a scholarship. A partial scholarship, my father said. We'd still have to come up with $20,000. That's not realistic. I did not cry at that table. I had learned not to cry in front of them. I went to my room. I sat on my bed. I did the math in my head, work, study, student loans, every part-time job I could find. It was going to be hard. It was going to be exhausting. But I was going to Prairie View. What happened 2 weeks later is something I have never forgotten. Brianna announced she wanted to enroll in a nail technician certification program at a private beauty school in Midtown Houston. The program cost $8,000. It was a 9-month course. My father wrote the check within a week. No folder required, no conversation about investment, no mention of community college. $8,000. Just like that. I was standing in the hallway when he signed it. He didn't look up. I worked 2 jobs all 4 years at Prairie View. Morning shifts at a coffee shop on campus, 4 in the morning until 8, then class until 4 in the afternoon. Evenings I cashiered at a grocery store off Highway 290. I ate dining hall food when I could afford it, and instant noodles when I couldn't. I shared a room with 3 other women my sophomore year because the cheaper dormitory had a wait list. I graduated with honors. Urban planning concentration in infrastructure development, GPA 3.9. Dean's List every semester. My graduation ceremony was held on a Saturday morning in May. The campus was full. Families with balloons and flowers and matching t-shirts that said things like, Proud Prairie View Parent. My parents did not come. The official reason was that Curtis had a work obligation, a Saturday site inspection that he said he couldn't reschedule. My mother said the drive was too long, and her back had been bothering her. The real reason, I think, was that they did not consider it important enough to rearrange a single thing. Brianna sent a text that afternoon. Congrats, I guess. Did you get your nails done for the ceremony? I looked at that text for a long time. Then I put my phone face down on the seat of my car and drove back to my dormitory alone. The summer after graduation, I moved back to Houston temporarily while I looked for work. I was staying in my old bedroom applying to planning firms across the city trying to save money. It was supposed to be 3 months. It stretched to 5. That summer, the Whitfield family reunion was held at Big Mama Odessa's land in Brenham, 18 acres of Red East, Texas soil that had been in the family since 1948. Every year, the reunion came back to that land. Folding tables under the pecan trees, music from a portable speaker, the smell of smoked brisket from before sunrise. I had been offered a position, not a full role, yet a contract consulting position with a small planning firm in Austin. The pay was modest, $62,000 a year. But it was real work, real projects, a foot in the door I had been trying to open for months. I shared the news at the dinner table on the second evening of the reunion. I had waited for the right moment. The food was good, the mood was easy. My aunt had just finished telling a funny story about her neighbor's dog. I said, I got a job offer, a consulting position in Austin, urban planning. My father nodded once, slowly, the nod that meant he was listening, but not particularly interested. That's nice, my mother said. She reached for the cornbread. Deshaun started talking about a new project at his construction job before I had finished my sentence. My father's face turned toward Deshaun like a sunflower turning toward light, instantly. Completely. Tell me about that, Curtis said to Deshaun, leaning forward with both elbows on the table. What's the square footage on that build? I sat with my announcement hanging in the air, unfinished, uncelebrated. Big Mama Odessa, sitting at the far end of the table, looked at me over the rim of her sweet tea glass. She didn't say anything. She just looked, and in that look was everything acknowledgement, understanding, and something else I couldn't name yet. Something that looked like it had been waiting a long time to become an action. I looked away first, stared at my plate, told myself it didn't matter. I almost believed it. That was the summer I stopped trying to be seen at that table and started building something they couldn't ignore. Austin suited me. Not immediately. The first year was hard in the way that first years always are when you are building something from nothing in a city where you know almost no one on a salary that barely covers rent and groceries with a little left over for emergencies that always seem to cost more than you saved. I rented a studio apartment in East Austin, $680 a month, one window, that faced a brick wall, a kitchen the size of a hallway. I furnished it slowly. A mattress first, then a desk. Then a secondhand bookshelf I carried up the stairs by myself on a Sunday afternoon, while my neighbors pretended not to notice. I did not complain about any of it. I had made a choice. I was going to build something real. The consulting firm was called Bridgepoint Planning Associates. Small operation, 11 people, 2 senior planners, a handful of associates, and 1 junior consultant, which was me. We worked primarily with mid-sized municipalities and private developers on infrastructure modernization projects, road corridors, transit access, and mixed-use zoning in underserved neighborhoods. The kind of work that doesn't make the front page, but shapes how a city actually functions for the people who live in it. I was good at it. Not because I had been told I was good at it. Nobody at Bridgepoint handed out compliments easily, but because I could feel when my analysis was right, when the numbers aligned, when a proposal I had built from scratch answered a problem that had been sitting unsolved for years. After 14 months, I was promoted to associate planner. After 2 years and 3 months, I was promoted to senior associate. Salary $87,000 a year. I called home when the second promotion came through. It was a Thursday evening. My mother answered. "Senior associate," I said. $87,000 a year. A pause. "That's good, Deja." Her voice was warm but distracted. I could hear the television in the background. "You know Brianna just opened her second nail station. She's got 2 girls working under her now. Your father is so proud. He's been telling everybody at church." I held the phone against my ear and looked at the wall of my apartment. "That's great for Brianna," I said. "You should call her. She'd love to hear from you." I said I would. I didn't. I sat at my desk for a long time after I hung up, not crying, just sitting, letting the feeling move through me and out the other side. Then I opened my laptop and started working on something I'd been thinking about for months. The idea had been forming slowly, the way most real ideas do, not in a single moment, but in the accumulation of many smaller ones. Every project I worked on at Bridgepoint, I noticed the same gap. Mid-sized construction and development companies were operating on outdated infrastructure frameworks. They were losing time, losing bids, losing money, because their internal systems couldn't communicate with municipal planning databases. Nobody was solving that problem specifically for them. The large firms had entire departments for it. The small firms couldn't afford those departments. I could build the bridge. I started the consulting firm on the side, Deja Whitfield Urban Planning Consultants, not a dramatic name, just my name, which felt important. The first client came through a contact I had made at a conference in San Antonio, a small residential developer who needed help modernizing their site analysis process. The contract was worth $94,000. I cried in my car after I signed it, not from sadness, from the specific relief of knowing that something you built with your own hands actually works. Within 18 months, I had 6 clients. Revenue crossed $1,200,000. I hired 3 people, 2 junior analysts, and an operations coordinator named Priya, who kept everything running with a precision I deeply admired. We moved out of my apartment and into a proper office space in North Austin. I did not tell my family any of this, not because I was ashamed. I was not ashamed of a single day of it. But I had learned something important over the years about sharing good news in the Whitfield household. It would be minimized, it would be redirected, it would be followed by a story about Brianna's nail stations or Deshawn's construction projects. And I no longer had the energy to watch my own life be treated like a footnote in someone else's story. So I kept building, quietly, steadily, the way Big Mama Odessa had always told me to. It was at a technology and infrastructure conference in Austin 2 years before that Thanksgiving that I first met Marcus Thibodeau. He was presenting a keynote on sustainable development frameworks for mid-sized construction firms in the Gulf Coast region. I was in the 3rd row taking notes. His presentation was sharp, specific. He understood the exact problem I had built my firm to solve. Afterward, during the reception, I approached him directly. Your framework for phased infrastructure integration, I said. The implementation gap you identified in Phase 2. I've been working on a solution for that specific problem for the last 2 years. He turned and looked at me with the full attention of someone who was not used to being surprised. He was in his early 50s, Creole Louisiana roots evident in the way he carried certain syllables, the kind of man who had built something real and knew exactly what that cost. "Tell me more," he said. We talked for 40 minutes, exchanged cards. 6 months later, Meridian Development Group sent a formal inquiry to my firm. I did not know then that Meridian Development Group was the company where my father had worked for 19 years. I did not know that Curtis Whitfield had a parking space with his name on a sign in the Galleria District garage. I did not make that connection until 3 months into the contract, when Marcus mentioned his operations manager by name in a meeting, and I felt the floor shift slightly beneath my chair. I said nothing. I finished the meeting. I drove home and sat in my car outside my apartment for 22 minutes. Then I thought about what Big Mama Odessa had said to me on that porch in Brenham the previous summer. It had been an early morning in late July. 4:30, the sky still deep blue. The land quiet in that particular way that East Texas land gets quiet before dawn. Big Mama Odessa had called me out to the porch herself. She had 2 cups of black coffee ready. She handed me one without a word. We sat for a while listening to the land. Then she said, "I've been watching this family for 74 years. I know what I see." I held my cup with both hands. "This land," she gestured out at the 18 acres of red soil stretching dark in the pre-dawn, "has been in this family since 1948. Your great-great-grandmother walked it barefoot, built something on it before anybody thought a black woman in Brenham, Texas could build anything at all." She reached into the pocket of her housecoat and pulled out a thick envelope sealed her name written across the back in her own handwriting. "I want you to have this," she said. "Not yet. You'll know when it's time." I looked at the envelope. "Big Mama, what is your—" "Don't open it yet." Her voice was final but not unkind. "When you need it, you'll know. And when that moment comes, don't you hesitate." I took the envelope. I held it like it was fragile. She put her hand over mine, warm, dry, certain. "You are not what they made you feel like," she said quietly. "You never were." I carried that envelope back to Austin in my bag. I put it in the small fireproof lockbox I kept in my closet next to my passport and my Prairie View diploma. 3 months later, the connection between Marcus Thibodeau and my father became clear. I did not open the envelope, not yet, but I thought about it every day from that point forward. And when my father called in October to tell me that he had personally invited his CEO to Thanksgiving dinner in Brenham, "Come on down, Deja, it'll be good for the family to be together," something shifted very quietly inside me. I knew the moment was getting close. Big Mama Odessa called me on the first Wednesday of November. Not a text, a call. Big Mama Odessa did not text. She believed that if something was worth saying, it was worth the sound of your voice saying it. "I want everybody on this land one more time," she said. "Thanksgiving, Brenham, tell your father." Her voice was steady, unhurried, the voice of a woman who had already decided something and was simply notifying the relevant parties. "Yes, ma'am," I said. "You coming the night before?" "Yes, ma'am." A pause, then, "Good, bring yourself, that's all you need." She hung up before I could ask what she meant. I sat with the phone in my hand for a moment. Then I went to my closet. I looked at the lockbox on the top shelf. I did not open it. I just looked at it. Then I got back to work. The drive from Austin to Brenham takes about an hour and 40 minutes on a clear day. I left Wednesday evening after my last call, the back seat loaded with a sweet potato casserole I had made the night before, Big Mama Odessa's recipe real butterfresh nutmeg, and the lockbox, which I had taken off the shelf and placed carefully in my overnight bag without quite knowing why. I arrived at the land just after 8 in the evening. The house was lit from every window, warm orange light spilling out across the porch. I could smell wood smoke before I even turned off the engine. Big Mama Odessa was sitting in her chair on the porch when I pulled up. 74 years old, straight-backed, a glass of sweet tea in one hand, watching the driveway like she had been expecting me at exactly this minute. I got out of the car. She looked at me for a long moment. "You ready?" she said. It was the same question she had asked me every year before the reunion, every year before church, every time something important was about to happen. I had always answered yes, without knowing what I was saying yes to. This time felt different. This time I understood that she was asking something real. "I think so," I said. She nodded once, like that was the right answer. "Come inside," she said. I made coffee. We sat at her kitchen table until almost midnight. We did not talk about Thanksgiving. We did not talk about my father or the envelope or Marcus Thibodeau. We talked about the land, the history of it, the specific weight of it. She told me things I had never heard before. How her own grandmother, the first Odessa, had acquired those 18 acres in 1948 through a land grant program that most Black families in Waller County never knew existed. How she had worked the land herself for 3 years before anyone helped her. How certain people in town had tried twice to have the deed invalidated and failed both times because the paperwork was airtight. She knew they would try, Big Mama Odessa said. So she made sure everything was documented, every signature, every witness, every date. She tapped the table with one finger. That's what people don't understand about land. The land itself don't care who owns it. But the paper is everything. I listened to every word. When I finally went to bed in the small room at the back of the house that had been mine every summer since childhood, I lay in the dark and stared at the ceiling for a long time. I thought about paper, documentation, the specific power of having things in writing. I thought about the contract with Meridian Development Group signed and filed and witnessed, $3,800,000. My name on it, my firm's name on it. I thought about the envelope in my lockbox. I thought about Big Mama Odessa asking you, ready I was still thinking when I fell asleep. Thanksgiving morning arrived gray and cool, 54 degrees Fahrenheit, the kind of November morning that smells like wood smoke and approaching winter. By 9 in the morning, the land was already filling up. Cars parked along the gravel path, relatives spilling out with foil-covered dishes and folding chairs, and children who ran straight for the pecan trees without stopping to greet anyone. 30 people in total. Aunts, uncles, cousins, a few family friends, whose faces I recognized, but whose names I had to quietly retrieve from memory. My parents arrived at 10:30. My father's car, a 2022 Chevrolet Tahoe Black, freshly washed, pulled up the drive with the careful precision of a man who wanted people to notice his vehicle. Curtis Whitfield stepped out in pressed khakis and a collared shirt, surveying the scene with the satisfaction of a man who had organized something, even though Big Mama Odessa had organized everything. My mother came around from the passenger side with the store-bought pecan pie in a plastic container. She saw me near the porch and waved with the hand that wasn't holding the pie. I waved back. Brianna arrived 20 minutes later with her boyfriend, a man named Terrell, who seemed pleasant enough and spent most of the morning standing near the food table. She was wearing a burnt orange wrap dress, fresh manicure, hair done. She looked good and she knew it. She hugged my mother first, then my father, then found me near the side of the house. "You look tired," she said. "I drove last night," I said. "You should have come this morning with the rest of us." She moved past me toward the kitchen. Deshaun arrived at 11 with his wife and 2 children, and the energy of the gathering shifted the way it always did when Deshaun arrived, louder, more focused, gravitating toward him automatically. My father clapped him on the back and held on for an extra second, the kind of greeting that meant something. I watched from the porch steps with a cup of coffee. Marcus Thibodeau arrived at 11:15. I saw him before my father did. A dark green Range Rover turning carefully down the gravel path, parking neatly at the edge of the grass. He stepped out in a navy suit, no tie collar, open, the kind of man who could dress down a suit jacket and still look like the most prepared person in the room. He scanned the gathering with quiet, practiced eyes. Then he found me. We looked at each other across the yard for approximately 3 seconds. Neither of us moved. Neither of us smiled. But something passed between us, recognition, acknowledgement, the shared understanding of 2 people who know something that the room does not. Then my father appeared from nowhere, hand extended, voice 2 registers louder than necessary. "Marcus Glad, you made it, sir. Welcome to the family land." Curtis spread his arms wide like he owned every acre of it. Marcus shook his hand. "Curtis, good to be here." My father turned to gesture at the gathering proudly. Let me introduce you to everybody. He steered Marcus toward Deshawn first, then Brianna, then my mother. When they reached me last, almost as an afterthought, my father glanced in my direction with the expression of a man identifying something he had momentarily forgotten to account for. "And this is my younger daughter," he said. "Deja. She does urban planning stuff. You know, city work." Marcus Thibodeau looked at me. I looked at him. "Deja," Marcus said. His voice was completely even. "Good to see you." My father frowned slightly. "You two know each other." "We've crossed paths," Marcus said simply. He smiled at my father. "You have a beautiful property here, Curtis." My father forgot his question immediately. He launched into the history of the land with the enthusiasm of a man who had nothing to do with acquiring it. I watched Marcus follow my father toward the main table. He glanced back at me once, just briefly. That same quiet look. I sat down on the porch steps and wrapped both hands around my coffee cup and felt something settle inside me. Not nerves, not anger. Something calmer and more certain than either of those things. Whatever was about to happen at that table, I was ready. I looked at the land, 18 acres of red East Texas soil, the pecan trees, the sky going pale gray above Brenham, and I thought about the first Odessa walking it barefoot. Then I went inside to help set the table. The table was set for 30. Big Mama Odessa's long oak table stretched the full length of the dining room, extended with 2 folding tables covered in matching cream tablecloths. The good china came out white plates with a thin gold rim that only appeared at Thanksgiving and Easter and funerals. Crystal glasses filled with sweet tea and water. In the center of the table, a spread that had taken 3 days to assemble smoked turkey cornbread dressing collard greens cooked with smoked turkey neck candied yams, macaroni, and cheese baked until the top was gold green beans with slivered almonds cranberry sauce from scratch and 2 sweet potato pies cooling on the sideboard. My mother had arranged the seating without asking anyone. Brianna sat at the right hand of my father near the head of the table. Deshawn sat at the left. Marcus Thibodeau was placed directly beside Curtis, the seat of honor, the guest my father wanted everyone to notice. My mother sat across from Curtis, composed and satisfied, the woman who had orchestrated everything. I was placed at the far end of the second folding table, near the kitchen door, the seat closest to the draft that came in every time someone moved between rooms. I noticed. I sat down without saying anything. Big Mama Odessa took her seat at the opposite head of the table, the end that faced the window, the end that looked out over the land. She moved slowly, deliberately, the way she always did. She did not look at the seating arrangement. She did not comment on it. She looked at me once across the full length of the table. Then she bowed her head for grace. My Uncle Raymond led the prayer. Long, specific, the kind of prayer that names every person at the table individually and takes 11 minutes and nobody minds because the food smells extraordinary. When he finished, the room filled immediately with the sound of serving spoons and passing dishes and the particular noise of 30 people who have not eaten together in a year. For the first hour, it was fine, good even. The food was exceptional. Conversations overlapped in the way they do at large family tables. Fragments of different discussions mixing together, children's voices cutting through from the side room, laughter erupting from 2 or 3 places at once. I ate. I answered when I was spoken to. I watched. Marcus Thibodeau was 2/3 of the way down the table from me, seated beside my father. I could see him clearly from where I sat. He ate with the quiet focus of a man accustomed to being in rooms where he needed to observe more than he performed. He spoke when my father addressed him. He was polite to everyone around him. He did not look in my direction often, but when he did, the look was steady and unreadable. My father was performing. That is the only word for it. Curtis Whitfield at a table with his boss was a different person than Curtis Whitfield at any other table. Louder, more expansive, full of stories that positioned him as central to every success, every decision, every project that Meridian Development Group had ever undertaken. He topped off Marcus's sweet tea twice without being asked. He laughed a half-second before the punchline of his own jokes. Marcus received all of this with gracious patience. Deshawn told a long story about a construction project in Pearland that had everyone's attention for 20 minutes. Brianna showed photographs of her new nail studio on her phone, passing it down the table for people to admire. My mother beamed at both of them with the specific radiance of a woman whose vision of her family was being confirmed in real time. Nobody spoke to me for the better part of an hour. I ate my cornbread dressing. I watched the pecan trees through the window. I was fine. It was after the plates were cleared, and before the pie was served, that my father stood up. I saw him rise from the corner of my eye. He picked up his sweet tea glass. He tapped it twice with his knife, the gesture of a man calling a room to attention. The table quieted in sections. Children's voices faded from the side room as they sensed the shift in adult energy. 30 faces turned toward Curtis Whitfield. He smiled, the wide, comfortable smile of a man in his element. "I just want to take a moment," he said, "to say how grateful I am for this land, for this family, for Big Mama Odessa opening her home to all of us and to our special guest today." He nodded toward Marcus, who inclined his head slightly, murmurs of appreciation around the table. "I want to acknowledge my son Deshaun." Curtis pointed at him with his glass. "Project supervisor at 29 years old, following in his father's footsteps and then some." Applause. Deshaun grinned and shook his head modestly. "And my daughter Brianna." Curtis turned toward her. 2 nail studios before 30. Entrepreneur, our shining star." More applause. Brianna touched her collarbone and smiled the smile of someone who had been expecting this. The room was warm and satisfied. People were nodding. My aunt was reaching for the pie knife. Then my father looked down the table. All the way down. Past the relatives, past the folding table junction, past the kitchen draft. To me. He tilted his head slightly, like he was considering whether to include me or not, and had decided in the spirit of comprehensiveness to go ahead. "And Deja," he said. A brief pause. The pause itself carried information. "I just want to be honest with y'all." His voice was still carrying the warmth of the previous toast, still smiling. "We raised a failure." He said it the way you say something you think is self-evident, the way you say the sky is blue or the food was good. He said it with the casual authority of a man who had never once considered that he might be wrong. "She never listened, never followed the path we laid out for her. I don't know where we went wrong." He shook his head with a small laugh, like it was a mystery that saddened and amused him simultaneously. 2 of my cousins laughed. Nervous laughter, the kind that fills silence when nobody knows what else to do. My mother looked at her plate. Brianna picked up her phone. The table went quiet. I did not move. I felt the words land. I felt them the way you feel cold water, immediate total, no part of you exempt. 31 years. That was how long I had been listening to variations of this. Quietly, without response, without the language for what it actually was. I had accepted it as the weather of my family, unpleasant, recurring beyond my control. Something shifted in that moment, not explosively, not with heat or noise, quietly, completely, the way a lock disengages. I looked across the table at Marcus Thibodeau. He had set his sweet tea glass down. His face was very still. The stillness of a man who has heard something that requires a response, but is taking the precise measure of his words before he speaks. He looked at my father. Then he looked at me. I gave the smallest nod. Almost nothing. Less than a breath. He turned back to Curtis. "Raymond." His voice was conversational, unhurried. The room heard it immediately because it was the first time Marcus Thibodeau had initiated a statement all afternoon. My father turned to him, pleased to be addressed. "Sir, do you know what your daughter does?" Marcus said, specifically. My father blinked. "Urban planning, city work. You know, Kibudeja's firm." Marcus had designed the infrastructure modernization framework for Meridian's entire Phase 3 Gulf Coast expansion. A pause, clean and deliberate. That contract was $3,800,000. I signed it personally, 8 months ago. The room did not go quiet gradually. It went quiet all at once, like something being switched off. My father's glass was still raised. His smile was still on his face, but his eyes had changed the particular blankness of a man whose understanding of the room has just been completely dismantled and has not yet found a new arrangement. Brianna looked up from her phone. My mother's fork touched her plate with a small sound that was very loud in the silence. I sat at my end of the table with my hands folded in front of me and said nothing. My face was calm. My breathing was even. 30 people. The chandelier throwing orange light. The pecan trees still outside the window. And at the far end of the table, Big Mama Odessa set down her sweet tea glass with the deliberate, quiet click. She looked at me with eyes that had been watching this family for 74 years. And she began slowly to stand up. Let me take you back. Before that table, before Marcus Thibodeau's voice cutting through the silence, before Big Mama Odessa rising from her chair with the slow certainty of someone who had been waiting a very long time to stand up. Let me take you back to the summer after my Prairie View graduation. The summer I drove back to Houston alone with my diploma in the back seat and nobody waiting at the finish line. That summer was the last time I waited for my family to see me. I made a decision on the drive back from Brenham after the reunion, the one where I had announced my consulting position, and my father had turned immediately to Deshawn's construction project without finishing his nod. I did not make the decision loudly or dramatically. I did not cry. I did not call anyone. I simply decided somewhere on Highway 290 between Brenham and Austin that I was done building my life in the direction of their approval. I was going to build it in the direction of something real instead. The first year in Austin was the year I learned what I was actually made of. The consulting position at Bridgepoint Planning Associates paid $62,000 a year. After rent, utilities, student loan payments, groceries, and the occasional emergency, a car repair in February, a dental crown in April that cost $900 I did not have, there was very little left. I tracked every dollar in a spreadsheet I updated every Sunday evening. I did not eat out. I packed lunch every day. I bought my work clothes from a consignment shop on East 6th Street run by a woman named Bernadette who knew her inventory better than most department store managers knew theirs. I was not miserable. I want to be clear about that. There is a particular kind of satisfaction that comes from a life with no waste in it, where every dollar has a purpose and every hour is accounted for and the things you have are the things you actually earned. I felt that satisfaction clearly in that first year. It was not comfortable, but it was mine. But at Bridgepoint, I worked harder than anyone else in the office. Not performatively, not to be noticed, simply because the work was interesting and I was trying to understand everything I could about how cities actually function, the infrastructure beneath the surface, the systems that most people never think about until they fail. I read planning reports from Houston, Dallas, Memphis, Baltimore. I studied redevelopment projects in historically Black neighborhoods, what had worked, what had displaced people, what had built genuine equity, and what had only rearranged poverty without addressing it. I had a notebook for every project. I filled them completely and started new ones. My senior planner at Bridgepoint, a woman named Dr. Constance Webb Sharp, exacting the kind of professional who circled errors in red pen and expected you to understand why, told me after my first performance review that I had stronger spatial analysis instincts than associates with 5 years more experience. She said it once. She did not repeat compliments, but I wrote it down that evening and looked at it sometimes when the work was hard. The idea for my own firm arrived, the way real ideas arrive, not in a flash, but in an accumulation. Project after project at Bridgepoint, I kept encountering the same problem. Mid-sized construction and development companies, the kind doing real work in real communities, not the corporate giants with entire planning departments, were operating on infrastructure assessment frameworks that were 15 years out of date. They were losing bids because their proposals couldn't demonstrate compliance with current municipal sustainability requirements. They were losing time because their internal systems couldn't integrate with city planning databases. Nobody was addressing this specific gap for this specific tier of company. I could address it. I had been addressing pieces of it for 3 years without realizing that was what I was doing. I spent 4 months building the framework on evenings and weekends. A comprehensive infrastructure modernization consulting model, assessment integration implementation, designed specifically for mid-sized developers. I stress-tested every component. I ran the numbers on pricing 12 different ways. I had Dr. Constance Webb look at the framework without telling her it was mine, framing it as a hypothetical industry model I wanted her professional assessment of. She studied it for 2 days. Then she looked at me over her reading glasses and said, Whoever built this understands the market better than most firms with 30 years in the business. I told her it was mine. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Then go build it. You're not going to find what you're looking for here." I gave my notice the following week. The first client came through a civil engineering contact I had made at a conference in San Antonio, a small residential developer named Holloway Properties, working primarily in underserved neighborhoods on the east side of San Antonio. They needed a complete infrastructure assessment for 3 proposed development sites. The contract was worth $94,000. I remember sitting in my car in the parking garage after signing the paperwork. The contract was in a manila folder on the passenger seat. I looked at it for a long time. Then, I thought about the kitchen table in Houston where my father had pushed back my Prairie View folder without opening it. $20,000? Not realistic. I sat in that parking garage and I cried for approximately 4 minutes. Then I wiped my face, started the car, and drove back to Austin to begin the work. Within 14 months, I had 6 clients. Revenue crossed $1,200,000. I hired Priya First Operations Coordinator Meticulous, the kind of professional who could track 17 moving pieces simultaneously, without losing a single one. Then 2 junior analysts fresh from UT Austin's planning program, both sharp, both hungry, in the way that people are hungry when they know they have something to prove. We moved out of my apartment and into a proper office in North Austin. Nothing extravagant, clean lines good. Light a conference room with a whiteboard the full length of one wall. I put a photograph on my desk, not a family photo, a photograph of Big Mama Odessa's land in Brenham, 18 acres of red East Texas soil at sunrise, taken from the porch on a July morning before anyone else was awake. I looked at it every time a project was difficult. The Meridian Development Group contract came through in the spring, 18 months after I opened my firm's doors. The inquiry landed in my business email on a Tuesday morning, a formal request for a capabilities presentation from a development firm evaluating infrastructure consultants for a major Gulf Coast expansion project. Company name Meridian Development Group. Contact name Marcus Thibodeau, Chief Executive Officer. I read the email 3 times. Then I search the name. Meridian Development Group. Headquarters in Houston's Galleria District. Operations across the Gulf Coast region. Established 19 years ago. I searched the staff directory. Curtis Whitfield, Assistant Operations Manager. I sat at my desk for a long moment. Priya knocked on my open door and asked if I wanted coffee. I said yes without looking up. I thought about calling Big Mama Odessa. I almost did. Instead, I opened the capabilities presentation I had been building for 18 months, and I started refining it for Meridian's specific Phase 3 requirements. Whatever this was, coincidence, convergence, something that had been moving toward this point for longer than I could track. I was going to meet it with the best work I had ever done. I presented to Marcus Thibodeau 6 weeks later in a conference room on the 14th floor of Meridian's Galleria headquarters. 45 minutes. Every question he asked I had an answer for. Every gap he identified I had already addressed. When it was over, he looked at me across the table for a moment that lasted longer than most professional silences last. Then he said, "We'll be in touch by end of week." The contract arrived on Thursday. $3,800,000. His signature at the bottom, clean and certain. I did not tell my family. I put the signed contract in my fireproof lockbox next to my passport and my Prairie View diploma and Big Mama Odessa's envelope, and I waited for Thanksgiving. The silence lasted 7 seconds. I counted them. Not deliberately the way you count anything when your body is very still and your mind is very clear, and time seems to be moving at a different speed than usual. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Then my father's glass came down, not slammed, just placed, on the tablecloth, with the particular heaviness of a man who has lost the thread of what he was doing and is trying to locate it. 3 million. He stopped, started again. "You said 3 million. $3,800,000, Marcus said. Exactly as he had said it the first time. No adjustment in tone, no softening or sharpening. Simply restating a fact for someone who had not processed it correctly the first time. My father looked at me. It was the first time in as long as I could remember that Curtis Whitfield looked at me without the mild dismissive quality that had colored every look he had ever given me. This look was different. This look was recalculating. I met it without expression. "Your company," he said. Not quite a question. My firm bet, I said. Deja Whitfield Urban Planning Consultants. We've been working with Meridian for 8 months. The words were simple, factual. I had no interest in performing triumph. I was simply stating what was true. Brianna had put her phone down completely. She was looking between me and my father with an expression I had never seen on her face before something unguarded stripped of its usual composure. My mother's hands were folded on the table in front of her empty plate. Her face was the face of a woman doing very rapid internal mathematics. Deshawn said nothing. He was looking at Marcus Thibodeau with the focused attention of a man reassessing the geometry of a room he thought he understood. 30 people. Complete silence. The chandelier throwing orange light across every face. And then, at the far end of the table, Big Mama Odessa stood up, 74 years old. She rose slowly, one hand braced on the table edge, straightening to her full height, which was not considerable in terms of inches, but was absolute in every other sense. She was wearing her good dress, the deep burgundy one she wore to church on High Holy Days. Her white hair was pinned back. Her face was the face of a woman who had been patient for a very long time and had decided that the patience was finished. Every head in the room turned toward her. She did not rush. She reached into the pocket of her dress and withdrew an envelope, thick, sealed, her own handwriting across the back. My envelope. I recognized it immediately. The same envelope she had pressed into my hands on the porch in Brenham the previous summer at 4:30 in the morning. The same envelope I had carried back to Austin in my bag and locked in the fireproof box on my closet shelf. Except this was not my envelope. I looked at the handwriting more carefully across the distance of the table. It was the same hand, but the name written across the back was not mine. It was addressed to the family. Big Mama Odessa held the envelope in both hands and looked down the full length of the table. She took her time. She looked at Deshawn. She looked at Brianna. She looked at my mother. She looked at my father for a long moment, a look that contained 40 years of watching and saying nothing, and deciding to hold the action until the right moment. Then she looked at me. "Deja," she said. Her voice was unhurried and carried completely in the silent room. "Come here, baby." I pushed back my chair. I walked the full length of the table past the cousins, past the aunts and uncles, past my mother's folded hands and my father's recalculating eyes, until I was standing beside Big Mama Odessa at the head of the table. She put one hand on my arm. Warm, certain. The hand of a woman who had made a decision and was at complete peace with it. Then she addressed the room. "This land," she said, "has been in this family since 1948. My grandmother, the first Odessa, acquired it through a land grant program that most people in Waller County never knew existed. She worked it alone for 3 years before anyone helped her. She documented every signature, every witness, every date, because she knew people would try to take it. Nobody moved. I have watched this family for 74 years. She paused. I have seen who works. I have seen who builds. I have seen who carries quiet dignity when the people who are supposed to love them give them every reason not to." Her hand tightened slightly on my arm. "And I have seen who gets treated like they are standing at the edge of every photograph." My mother made a small sound, almost inaudible. Big Mama Odessa did not look at her. 3 years ago, she continued, I had my attorney prepare new documentation, everything witnessed, everything notarized, everything filed with the county. She held up the envelope. "This is my will, and I am reading the relevant portion of it right now in front of everyone at this table, so that there is no confusion and no room for dispute." She opened the envelope herself, drew out several folded pages, put on the reading glasses she kept in her other pocket. The room was so quiet, I could hear the pecan trees moving outside in the November wind. She read in a clear, steady voice, "I, Odessa May Whitfield, being of sound mind, do hereby bequeath the entirety of my property at Brenham, Texas, 18 acres, the primary structure and all outbuildings, all mineral rights, all associated documentation to my granddaughter Deja Renee Whitfield, solely and without condition." She lowered the pages. "The assessed value of this land at current market rate," she said, looking directly at my father, "is $1,800,000. A development group in Brenham has made a standing offer of $3,200,000. Deja will decide what to do with it. not anyone else. Deja. My father stood up. His chair scraped against the old wood floor, a sound that was very loud in the silence. His face had moved through several expressions in the last 30 seconds, and had arrived at something between disbelief and outrage, the expression of a man whose understanding of the world has been revised without his consent. Mama. His voice was careful, controlled, the voice he used when he was trying to manage a situation. You can't. This land belongs to all of us. This is the family land. But Big Mama Odessa looked at him with the patient clarity of a woman who had anticipated this exact sentence. I built it, she said simply. I decide. You're 74 years old. You don't understand what you're more... Curtis. Her voice did not rise, did not harden. It simply stopped him. The way a door stops you. Completely. Without effort. I understood what I was doing 3 years ago when I signed it. I understood what I was doing this morning when I put it in my pocket. And I understand what I am doing right now. She folded the pages back into the envelope. Do not talk to me about understanding. My father closed his mouth. At the other end of the table, Marcus Thibodeau picked up his sweet tea glass with the unhurried calm of a man who had seen corporate boardrooms combust and knew that the correct response to volatility was stillness. Brianna looked at me across the table. The unguarded expression was still there. Something moving underneath it that I could not entirely read, part anger, part something older and more complicated that I thought might be somewhere under everything recognition. So she just gets everything. Brianna's voice was tight. Because she has some fancy company now. Big Mama Odessa turned her gaze to Brianna slowly, with the specific patience of a woman who had watched a person their entire life and knew every layer. She gets it, Big Mama Odessa said, because she is the only person at this table who reminds me of the first Odessa, who built something from nothing when nobody was watching and nobody was helping and nobody thought to say, well done. She put the envelope in my hands. It was lighter than I expected. Paper and ink. The weight of a decision made 3 years ago by a woman who had been paying attention when no one else was. I held it with both hands. Thank you, I said. My voice came out steady. I had not been certain it would. Big Mama Odessa put her palm against my cheek, warm, dry, the hand that had made coffee at 4:30 in the morning, and pressed envelopes into my hands, and told me I was not what they had made me feel like. Your great-great-grandmother walked this land barefoot, she said quietly, just for me. Now you build on it. She sat back down. She picked up her sweet tea. She looked out the window at the 18 acres of red East Texas soil, the pecan trees moving in the November wind, the sky going pale gray above Brenham. And for the first time all afternoon, she looked entirely at peace. The room stayed quiet for a long moment after Big Mama Odessa sat down. Then my father found his voice. It came back in pieces first, the breath, then the posture, then the words assembling themselves in the way that a man reassembles himself when he has been publicly dismantled and cannot afford to stay dismantled in front of his boss. This is not the time or place for this, Curtis said. His voice was measured, controlled, the operations manager voice, the voice he used in meetings when something had gone sideways and he needed to appear to be the steadiest person in the room. Mama, we can discuss the property separately, as a family, privately. Big Mama Odessa did not respond. She was looking out the window. What she means, my mother said, stepping in with the smooth redirection she had practiced for decades, is that this is a conversation we should all have together, calmly, when emotions aren't running so high. She looked at me with an expression that was warm on the surface and pressurized underneath. Deja, I'm sure you understand. I had heard that sentence my entire life, delivered in exactly that tone, accompanied by exactly that look. I'm sure you understand, which meant be smaller, be quieter, make this easier for everyone. Absorb this so the rest of us don't have to feel it. I looked at my mother for a moment. I understand perfectly, I said. I'm going to keep the land. The table exhaled in different directions. 2 of my cousins shifted in their seats. My Aunt Patricia put her hand over her mouth. Deshaun was very still, arms crossed jaw, set watching me with an expression I could not fully read. My father's controlled composure cracked along its edges. Deja. His voice dropped to the register he used when he wanted to communicate that he was being patient, but would not be patient indefinitely. Your grandmother is 74 years old. She doesn't fully understand the financial implications of what she just... Curtis! Big Mama Odessa's voice came from the window end of the table without her turning her head. One word. The same word she had used 20 minutes earlier. It landed with the same weight. My father stopped. "You have said enough," she said, still looking out the window. "More than enough for one afternoon." The muscle in my father's jaw moved. He looked at Marcus Thibodeau, perhaps hoping for some form of professional solidarity, some indication that the man who controlled his career was not witnessing the complete unraveling of the image Curtis had spent 19 years constructing. Marcus was looking at his sweet tea glass. His face was neutral. He had the particular stillness of a man who understood that his presence in this room was already consequential enough without adding his voice to it. My father looked back at me. Father. It was Brianna who spoke next. She had been quiet since Big Mama Odessa read the will, unusually quiet for Brianna, who filled most rooms with her presence reflexively and completely. But she had been sitting with something since the moment Marcus Thibodeau had said $3,800,000 and whatever it was had been building. "So you just get everything." She said it again, but differently than before. Less sharp, more raw. "The land, the contract, the you just get everything? And we get what exactly?" I looked at her across the table, at the burnt orange dress and the fresh manicure in the face that had been centered in every family photograph for 30 years. "I'm not taking anything from you, Brianna," I said. "I never had anything you had to give up." "That's not what I mean." She pressed her fingers against the tablecloth. "I mean, we worked hard too. I built something too. 2 studios from nothing. Nobody gave me a contract worth millions." "Nobody gave me one either," I said. "I built my firm for 3 years before Meridian called. I worked 2 jobs through college. I drove back from my own graduation alone because nobody came." I paused, not for effect, just to make sure the next sentence came out evenly. "I'm not competing with you, Brianna. I never was. The competition was always one-sided." Something moved across Brianna's face, the unguarded quality I had noticed earlier deeper, now less protected. "You think it was easy?" she said quietly, "being the one they put in the middle of every picture." The table was very still. I looked at my sister, really looked at her, the way I had not allowed myself to look in years because looking too carefully at Brianna had always cost me something. "No," I said after a moment. "I don't think it was easy." It was the most honest thing I had said to her in 20 years. And I meant it. Because I had thought about it in the long quiet of Austin evenings, in the space that opens up when you are no longer spending all your energy trying to be seen. I had thought about what it cost to be the one your parents used to measure everyone else against. The specific pressure of being the standard, the way that kind of love flattens you even as it elevates you. Brianna looked at me for a long moment. She did not apologize. I did not expect her to, not today. But something shifted between us. Small, real. The first honest thing that had passed between us in longer than I could accurately calculate. My father made one more attempt. He waited until the table had loosened slightly, until cousins had begun quietly resuming conversations, and children had drifted back from the side room, and the particular acute tension of the previous 30 minutes had diffused into something more ambient. Then he came to where I was standing near the window, away from the main table with my sweet tea and Big Mama Odessa's envelope. He stood beside me, looking out at the land. For a moment he said nothing. I could feel him assembling words, testing combinations, discarding them, trying to find the approach that would produce the outcome he wanted. "I didn't mean it the way it came out," he said finally. I waited. "The failure thing? It was a poor choice of words. I was trying to make a point about independence, about doing things your own way." He cleared his throat. I'm proud of what you've built, Deja. I want you to know that. I listened to every word. I let them sit in the air between us without rushing toward them or away from them. Then I said, "You've had 31 years to say something kind to me, Daddy, one kind thing." Unprompted. Not because someone else was in the room. Not because you needed something. I looked at him. I can't think of one time. He opened his mouth. "I'm not saying this to hurt you," I continued. "I'm saying it because it's true, and I think you know it's true. And I think somewhere underneath all of this, the parking space with your name on it, and the show you put on for your boss, and the toast to Deshaun and Brianna, I think you know exactly what you've done." My father looked out at the land for a long time without speaking. His face was not angry anymore. It was something older than anger and harder to name. Regret has a specific quality when it arrives too late and knows it. It does not look like sadness. It looks like a man standing very still in front of something he cannot undo. "I'm not asking for an apology," I said. "Not today. I'm just done pretending the ledger is balanced when it isn't." I picked up my sweet tea. "I'm going to sit with Big Mama Odessa," I said. "You're welcome to join us if you want to. But I'm not going to stand here and make this easier than it is." I walked back to the head of the table where Big Mama Odessa was sitting, still looking out the window at the pecan tree, still entirely at peace. I sat down beside her. She did not look at me. She just reached over and put her hand on mine on the tablecloth. Warm, dry, certain. We sat like that for a long time. Outside, the November wind moved through the 18 acres of red East Texas soil. The pecan trees bent slightly and straightened. The sky above Brenham had gone the deep gray of late afternoon, the kind of gray that is not sad but simply true, the color of a day that has said everything it needed to say and is now resting. My father did not join us at the window end of the table. He went back to his seat. He did not make another toast. "It has been 4 months since that Thanksgiving. I want to tell you what my life looks like now. Not to prove anything. Not to perform a resolution that ties everything into a neat conclusion, but because I think the truth of what comes after is as important as the drama of what happened at that table, and the truth is quieter, slower, and in some ways more significant than any single moment under a chandelier in Brenham, Texas. I did not sell the land. I want to say that clearly because I think people expect that to be the ending, the number, the transaction, the moment where the inheritance becomes currency and the currency becomes evidence of having won something. But I had been thinking about those 18 acres for months before Thanksgiving, and the answer I kept arriving at was the same every time. The first Odessa did not acquire that land to sell it. She acquired it to build on it. So that is what I am doing. 3 weeks after Thanksgiving, I drove back to Brenham on a Saturday morning and walked the full 18 acres with a landscape architect named Simone Brossard, a Black woman from New Orleans who had been doing community center design work in the Gulf South for 15 years and whose approach to land and its relationship to the people who live on it matched everything I believed about what good planning actually means. We walked for 3 hours. We talked about the soil, the light, the existing structures, the way the land sat in relation to the town. We talked about what Waller County needed, what Black women professionals in Texas needed, what a space built on generational land by a Black woman for Black women could actually look like and feel like and do. By the time we finished walking, the outline of something real had formed. The Odessa Center, a retreat and professional development space for Black women in architecture, planning, engineering, and design fields, where we have always been undercounted and underestimated. Weekend intensives, mentorship residencies, a library of professional resources, a kitchen that would serve the kind of food Big Mama Odessa made real, butterfresh nutmeg recipes that carry memory in them, and a front porch with chairs because every important conversation I have ever had in my life started on a porch. We broke ground in February. The projected opening is 14 months from now. Big Mama Odessa knows every detail. She sits with me every Sunday when I visit and listens to the progress reports with her sweet tea in her hand and her eyes on the land. She does not say much during these updates. She nods. Occasionally, she asks a practical question about drainage, about the foundation, about the wood we are using for the porch floor. Last Sunday, she said, Your great-great-grandmother would have loved this. That is the highest praise I have ever received. My firm is doing well. The Meridian contract completed on schedule in January. Marcus Thibodeau sent a formal letter of commendation professional, specific the kind of documentation that carries weight in the industry. We are currently in conversation about a Phase 4 partnership. I have not made a decision yet. I am taking my time. In February, I hired 2 more people, a senior analyst named Jerome Webb and a communications director named Aisha Fontaine, who had been doing similar work in Atlanta and reached out after hearing about the Meridian project through a mutual contact. The team is now 7 people. The work is good. Real work on real problems in real communities. I am not wealthy in the way that the word is usually used. I am not driving a car with a name that impresses people at dinner parties. I live in the same North Austin neighborhood I moved to 3 years ago in an apartment that has good light, and a desk I have now completely outgrown, and a bookshelf that is no longer sufficient for what I keep buying. But I am building something that matters, something that has my name on it, something that started from nothing and grew, because I refused to stop working on it, when the people who were supposed to believe in me did not. That is enough. It is more than enough. My father called 3 weeks after Thanksgiving. A Thursday evening, I was at my desk reviewing site plans for the Odessa Center. My phone lit up with his name, and I looked at it for a full ring cycle before I answered. Deha. His voice was different than it had been at the table. Quieter. The operations manager register was gone. What was underneath it was something older and less constructed. Hi, Daddy? A long pause. The kind of pause that contains something unfinished being slowly assembled. I've been thinking, he said, about what you said, at the window. I waited. I'm not good at this. He cleared his throat. I know that. Your mother would say I'm not good at saying things. She'd be right. I know, I said. I don't want... He stopped, started again. I don't want things to be the way they've been. I held the phone and looked at the site plans on my desk, the outlines of the Odessa Center, the porch, the kitchen, the library. I hear you, Daddy. I said, I do, but I need you to understand something. Me hearing you is not the same as things going back to how they were. I'm not going back to that table as the person who sits at the edge and says nothing. That's not something I'm willing to do anymore. Silence. I'm not asking you to disappear from my life, I continued. I'm asking you to show up differently, or not at all. Those are the options. He was quiet for a long time. Okay, he said finally. Just that, one word flat and uncertain, the word of a man who does not yet know what okay means in practice, but has decided to say it anyway. Okay, I said. We talked for 11 more minutes about nothing consequential, the weather in Houston, a construction project Deshawn was working on, whether Big Mama Odessa had mentioned anything to me about her hip bothering her. Small talk, careful and tentative, the conversation of 2 people who have been very honest with each other and are now trying to locate the ordinary ground beneath the honesty. When I hung up, I sat at my desk for a while. I did not feel triumphant. I did not feel sad. I felt clear. The specific clarity that comes when you have said the true thing, and the true thing has been heard, and the outcome of it is now in someone else's hands. Brianna texted me in December. A short message, 4 sentences. She said she had been thinking about what I said at the table. She said she was sorry for the nail comment at graduation. She said she did not realize how bad things had been for me, or that she had not let herself realize it, and she was not sure which was worse. I read the message twice. Then I typed back, thank you. That means something. Not a full reconciliation. Not a resumption of sisterhood as though the previous 30 years had not happened. But something honest passing between 2 people who shared a childhood and have different memories of it and are both in their own ways trying to figure out what to do with that. It is a beginning. Small and real and not guaranteed to become anything more than what it is right now. That is enough for now. Last Sunday morning, I arrived at Big Mama Odessa's house before sunrise. 4:30, the sky still deep blue, the land quiet in that particular East Texas way. She had the coffee ready, 2 cups, black. We sat on the porch in the cold November air, or I suppose by now it is March air, though it still feels like winter on that porch before the sun comes up. And we looked out at the 18 acres together. The red soil, the pecan trees, the faint outline of where the Odessa Center's foundation has been laid, visible even in the pre-dawn, as a slightly different shade of darkness against the land. Big Mama Odessa held her cup in both hands. "You know what this land is," she said after a while. I waited. "It's proof," she said, "that we were here, that we built something, that somebody saw the value in a piece of ground when nobody else was looking." She took a sip of coffee. "That's what you are too, Deja, proof." I held my cup and looked at the land and thought about the first Odessa walking it barefoot before the sun came up, before anyone thought a Black woman in Waller County could own anything at all. I thought about the kitchen table in Houston, where my father pushed back my Prairie View folder. I thought about driving back from graduation alone. I thought about $94,000 in a manila folder on a passenger seat and crying for 4 minutes and then wiping my face and driving home. I thought about 7 seconds of silence at a Thanksgiving table while 30 people held their forks in the air, and sitting on that porch in the dark with the land in front of me and Big Mama Odessa beside me and the Odessa Center's foundation laid in the red soil 50 yards away. I felt something I had been waiting my whole life to feel. Not vindication, not victory, peace, complete unqualified nobody can take this from me peace. For the first time in 31 years, I did not need anyone at that table to see me. I already knew exactly what I was worth, and it had nothing to do with them. Your worth was never theirs to assign. Some people in your family will truly see you, the way Big Mama Odessa saw Deja. Hold on to those people, build on that ground. The rest will have to figure themselves out on their own time. Thank you so much for staying with me until the end. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe. I'd love to hear from you. Have you ever had to set a boundary with family? How did it change your life? Drop your thoughts in the comments, and if you want more stories like this, check out the video in the description. Until next time, take care of yourself. You deserve it.